episode of Jiujiteiras. I'm Babs.
I'm Katie.
And today we are in the lovely home of Madeline Hughes, our special guest. She is the owner of Jiu Wellness, as well as the co-owner of the new West River Jiu-Jitsu here in Prince Edward Island. Thank you so much for having us here and being on our show.
Oh, I've been having such a good time having you guys over for the weekend, and excited to get to chat.
Yeah. So tell, if you wouldn't mind telling our guests. Sorry.
Listeners.
Yeah, our listeners. There we go. It is like 7:45 in the morning, so we're not normally up this early. Tell our guests a little bit about your background in
Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah.
Okay. I started training Jiu-Jitsu when I was 36. My middle son was in wrestling and school, and I had started a boot camp, like a martial arts boot camp with Jason Sago, which was just quite close in my community in Clyde River. And there was also a kids jiu-jitsu program there that Paul Abel was teaching. So I had enrolled my son and was there just watching him do the class. I was kind of like getting a little bit more into that world with the boot camp that I was doing. And then just realized sitting on the sidelines, like, oh, I think I really want to try that. And the first class I did, I was like, okay, this is my thing now. And I've been training pretty consistently ever since, aside from a couple of injuries that took me out for a little bit. But yeah, so that was, it'll be 10 years this spring.
Oh, wow. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
And in that journey, you've since made some huge changes, like one, opening up a new business. Well, two actually now, right? You've moved from.
Yeah.
And lots of competition too as well in between there. So.
Yeah, I started competing as a white belt. I think when I was like a one-stripe white belt, I did my first tournament. I actually won an entry like on a Facebook competition to a tournament, and I was like, oh shoot, now I kind of have to go, but I wanted to. So I started competing really early on, and I competed like right through, and I'm still actively competing. Not quite as much as I used to, but still want to be in the game, be in the mix with that. I trained for quite a few years, and then a few of us opened up a strictly jiu-jitsu gym in downtown Charlottetown. We opened that as a not-for-profit, so we were a board and running the gym, and that was going amazing. So that's where I was for the last 4 years. And a lot of growth in the sport and everything since then. And so just recently we moved back and opened a gym, or moved back into our community, and we've opened a small gym like at the community center here in Bonshaw. And with a real emphasis on building like the community aspect of it, the self-development aspect of it, and support, and kind of really just building something where people can come learn something that they may be intimidated to go to like a bigger facility to learn jiu-jitsu. Like I find there's a lot of barriers to people starting training. Like most people you talk to say, oh, I would love to do jiu-jitsu, or I'd love to try, but they just never show up.
Yeah. And
that's something I've been thinking a lot about, and like what is that barrier to that first initial class for people to go to. And as you get older and a little bit more set in your ways and like how you like to do things, I found I just wanted to build a gym kind of exactly what would be really comfortable for me to go and train in. And that's what Tyler and I did. So
nice.
It's been going well. Yeah, we're only a month in, and so far so good.
Well, it was beautiful to visit it, and it has like a really nice atmosphere. I feel like it's got like that vibe, like a good energy to it.
Yeah, we think so too.
I think you'll be very successful.
We're having a really good time so far, and it's just been amazing. Like the community aspect that is building already. We were only a month in. Like I said, we did a few open mats and things in December, as when we were ready to open up, and there's children that started like the first day and haven't missed a class. There's parents of those children that again probably never would have went to a jiu-jitsu class if it wasn't like, oh, this is like in our community.
Yeah,
let's check it out, or their child is starting or whatever. And now we already have like full families who are like, this is our thing now. And so like the parent and the child both train, and all of these kind of things, and all of these connections within the community. Like we're meeting neighbors that we never would have met at all, and it's so neat. Like everybody that comes is like, where you live? I'm on this road, I'm on this road, and we're like, oh my gosh, and what do you do? And it's like we're meeting so many cool people from our community that we never really would have met. So because like I've lived in this community for 12 years and grew up really just in the next community over, but we've really lost that sense of community where people don't really get to know each other. And when I was training downtown, it was like, yeah, it was great, there's tons of good connections, lots of a great community there as well, but I was like a half hour away, so it was a big travel time. And yeah, just really wanting to build something within the small community here. And it's so far going really, really well. And it's been very rewarding already. So it's interesting to see where it's going to grow to. We're really not sure what it's going to look like, and what this sort of blend of leaning heavily into that community aspect of jiu-jitsu and the self-development and the community support. So we have lots of ideas for building our programs there. We really want to focus on the children's program as well as the youth program that really is identified, especially in Prince Edward Island, but in Eastern Canada, as like the population that's most at risk with mental health. So because that's, the other passion in my life is helping people have more sort of peaceful, enjoyable lives, that and just finding ways to kind of blend the two things together. Because being a jiu-jitsu practitioner for like almost 10 years now, like it's helped me through so many things, and I've learned so many lessons through jiu-jitsu. And, everybody sort of talks about that, but it's like there's really something there that I think we can really lean into and not just like advertise as, that side of it, but like leaning in heavily into that side of it and showing people that like there's so many benefits, but it's not easy. Jiu-jitsu is a challenging activity to do, and especially if you're, want to compete and things like that, but it can help you with your whole life. Like it can help you with aspects outside of your life, and that's really where we're putting a lot of our focus.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. And it's true. Like we talked to Coach Mike Meehan around this time last year about jiu-jitsu and mental health and the importance, and like his story of how it helped him. And I'm sure you've seen not only yourself, but many of your like students or colleagues along the way, like
Absolutely.
that have really benefited from it.
Well, I don't think anyone doesn't. It's like if you can't train jiu-jitsu and not have it affect you and have it affect your life, because it's such a difficult sport. So it's just like builds so much resilience, and there's so many lessons along the way from white belt. And then it's like once you've gone through a couple of the belts, you've been training for a long time, it helps you to start other new things where you don't feel like you know what you're doing. So, and it's like that mindset of like, okay, well, I'm going to start this new thing. I don't really know, like, you know a little bit about it. You do as much prep as you can, but it's like, I'm a white belt at this. And you have to, it's like a really good framework to kind of lean on to go back and be like, hey, I'm starting a new business. I'm doing everything I can, but you're a white belt. Like you have to learn by experience. So you kind of know that like it's supposed to kind of suck and be really hard at first. And then it gets a little bit easier, but more challenging, the further you get into anything. So I sort of use that as a framework for like a lot of new things that I will start up in my life. And I think that's something like a really good recipe for a healthy like mindset, a healthy life, is to be challenging yourself a lot, to try new things and to learn new things and to suck at stuff. I think is really important. So I love seeing that, like the new people start at jiu-jitsu, and the people that have started training with us, like you're so proud of them already. Like we're only a month in, and it's like, one of the new students, he swept me the other night, and I was like, oh my God. And you're like, shit, I got swept, but then you're like, that was awesome. Like I totally taught him that, and he picked it up already, and he's already like hitting things and hitting timing. And it's like what we're doing, like making a super comfortable place for people to come and like put themselves out there and actually try it and like realize like there's things to grab on here that I really like, and they're putting it together and already developing, and they're like really comfortable. And the jiu-jitsu is actually progressing, because I was kind of like, this is all going to be great. I knew I was confident in that it was going to help people and build community, and that people would like to be there and like to train. But I was like, I wonder what the caliber of jiu-jitsu will kind of be with this sort of mindset or this sort of paradigm that we're sort of like focusing on. And but now I'm kind of seeing like, oh, these guys are getting really good, and like there's a lot of potential for growth. And we did a lot of thinking about like, if you were starting over, how would you have wanted to learn like from the beginning? And there was a lot of things that I could have done without, particularly for me. And I think it's pretty common, like, the whole be put on the spot to perform or do like shrimping with everybody watching you. Like that's everyone's worst nightmare, to be in the line drill. Like, I think you talked about that.
Yes, I did.
So it's not that we're like, everyone's really babied or like there's nothing challenging about it, but our whole sort of philosophy is to like help people be comfortable, adapt to people's different learning styles. Just like if you show up and you've had a shit day and like you don't have much to give and your brain's like not up for it, it's like, please still come, because it's going to help you in some way or another, or it's going to show the other people that are there. It's like, you don't have to show up perfect. You don't have to show up 100 all the time, because that's not realistic. And I think that's where we've lost, or like that's really adds to a lot of people's anxieties, is this expectation that everyone is supposed to perform at 100 all the time. And I was like definitely stuck in that mindset for a really long time. So just the atmosphere that we've created and the comfort that people have when they come there, and knowing, and we talk about everything, like it's very real. We have very real conversations there, and everyone kind of already is like, oh, this is a place you can be accepted exactly as you are. And it's like, we talk about the hard stuff, like at the gym. And you guys have probably seen this too, that like after training, when everyone's sitting around chit-chatting, it's like everyone's so open, and it's your sort of like barriers are down quite a bit after you've trained, because it's like, and it's also, you develop such intimate relationships with the people that you're training with, because it's such a close contact sport, and you're having to have a lot of trust in each other, you know, to train together in this capacity that we do. So it really opens up a really good like connections between the people. So I find that there's like a lot of opportunity for connection and support in that setting. So that's really what we're up to.
I love that.
Yeah, same. That is pretty amazing, because it's true. There's so much, I guess, different layers of people's expectations when they go into gyms, and depending on what the culture is, and you know, are they like a training gym? Are they a competition gym? Are they like all of those things? And then you have all these different personalities and egos in there. So
yeah, definitely.
sure.
And I mean, we're open to all of that as well. Like it's, we still train really hard. It's not that it's like not hard training or anything like that, but it's like you're allowed to be not at your best in that day. And it's like everything's kind of okay. And it's not, you know, if you don't have a gi, you wear whatever. Like it's just very like adaptable is what we're kind of going for. So
I think that's awesome.
yeah.
That's really cool. I guess because there was a couple of things I know, and unfortunately, not unfortunately, but talking about it behind the scenes.
I know we've spent so much time talking. We probably have hours and hours of
podcast
we could have done already, and now we did all the other stuff, and now that's why we're recording at 7 a.m. It's the only other time we have left. Yeah.
So going back to like your original profession, because you had kind of talked about like the growth that you had from teaching as teaching nursing to how that translated and how that helped you with your journey as instructing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my background is I'm a registered nurse, and I have been for, 18 years, I think it would be this spring that I graduated. I specialized in pediatric nursing and worked in acute care initially, like when I first started, but pretty quickly became disillusioned with like the healthcare system. Even like back in that time, I was like, wow, this is very different from kind of what I thought. It wasn't as supportive of environment as I thought it would be. And I was kind of, you know, after just graduating from nursing school, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, this is not what I thought. This is, you know, not the capacity of like how I thought I would be helping people. So at that time, I actually went and studied a lot of different naturopathic therapies. I became a licensed acupuncturist. I was doing allergy treatments and just started getting into more the naturopathic side of things. And as a lot of people do, once you start studying in that area, it's like new modalities keep coming up that you want to learn. And so I've got a kind of really good broad framework for natural healing. I did all my levels of Reiki back like 17 years ago, and nobody really knew what it was. And I worked in a clinic for quite a few years, and then it wasn't until I had my third child that I went back into acute care nursing for various circumstances. But at that time, I went back and was working at Prince County Hospital on the maternal child care unit because I had peds experience. I learned labor and birth, maternal newborn nursing, obstetrics, and was working there, and then was approached by the university, and they asked me to come and teach a group of clinical students. And I was like, no, I can't. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I can't. Again, going back to the white belt thing, but I always was pretty brave to take on new roles and take chances with things. So I started teaching there, and that was like a really good fit for me. And I thought, oh, I'm still getting like the acute care side of it with being in clinical with the students, but I really love teaching. I really love connecting with the students and really helping them to see the patients like through a broader lens and not just like a task list of what needs to be done. So I actually spent 12 years teaching at the university in maternity and pediatrics, just up until this January. I just resigned from that to do my new job. So I was teaching, you know, as a career in the classroom, in the clinical setting. And then when the guys and I opened up the gym, Charlottetown BJJ, I jumped into a teaching role there as well because we were the instructors. We didn't really know how that gym was going to take off. Like, it was during COVID that we opened the gym during the pandemic. So But it grew quickly. As we know, it's probably the biggest gym on PEI now, and
Yeah.
we have a big membership there, and it's done really great. So I had a lot of opportunity to teach, like right from blue belt. Before that, I was always teaching, helping with the kids programs. Everywhere I was training, I always was like kind of the helper with the kids classes, which helped me learn jiu-jitsu very thoroughly, I felt. And as I continued on teaching the children's classes through at Charlottetown BJJ, a lot of the parents that train jiu-jitsu as well, they would like stay for the kids class, and they'd be like, I learned so much from the way you teach the kids, you know, and because just the way I kind of do it, I break things down very simply. I have really tried to keep it in digestible chunks and, you know, work and give good examples and analogies, which is like my teaching style in nursing as well. So I knew that my specific style of teaching was helpful to a lot of people, and specifically people that may have like some challenges learning or have a little bit of anxiety or something like that. So over the years, I've taught adult and children's classes there. So then when this opportunity came up for Tyler and I to open the gym, I knew I'd have like heavy on the teaching side of it there. I'm teaching a lot of the classes, but Tyler and my son Simon are going to be taking on some of the teaching role as well as we get our feet under us and get things rolling there. So yeah, it's kind of led into that.
So the skills from teaching in medical transferred over, and do you find that there's an advantage for being a smaller person instructing? Do you notice like more technical or different?
I do, yeah. And I think that's smaller people, everyone always says that, like you learn from a small person, like if they're successful in jiu-jitsu, like they're very technical usually, because you're not strong, you're not stronger than your training partners most of the time, so you really have to rely on the technique. There's nothing else. Like it was interesting getting to roll with Katie last night, because I literally never roll with anybody that's my size, like barely ever. And it's so different to be able to just fully relax and like kind of turn that safety switch off, where you're like, I'm not gonna, get a knee tweaked or get a rib hurt just from a slip or just from, letting someone pass my guard, and it's like it's good in a sense, training in that way, that it does help your jiu-jitsu develop really quickly, but it over time, I think if you're always in that setting where you're the smaller one, you're the woman, you're mostly training with men, over time you start to develop like some fear around like and get pretty specific about who you like to train with and who you're comfortable to roll with and fully roll. And when you're competing and you have to do like competition style rounds, it can get very challenging when you don't have training partners that are like close to your size. So yeah, I feel like it's a good and it's a positive and a negative being a smaller person. It's, obviously like anything. And I think from teaching in clinical, one of the things that was a challenge was always like, as you're teaching a young nurse to do a new skill, you always want to like put your hands in there and do it for them and show. And so I really had to learn over those years to like hands off and explain just with words and not over explain. So I always only give it as much as is needed. You don't want to just keep telling them everything over to do, because you're trying to help them, let them develop the neural pathways to like get the new move or the new technique or the new skill, whatever it might be. So it's always like a measured response of like just prompts, like however much they need so that they can develop it on their own. And I think that definitely carried over to the way I teach jiu-jitsu as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit yesterday about how like you advocate for like when you're with people and setting the boundaries of like, too much pressure, or like, what would you be your suggestions for someone new starting out, like to establish like that comfort of communication with people?
For sure. It's something that we talk about at the gym, like every class. And it's really only been the last couple of years where I really feel like I did start advocating for myself and like being a little bit more choosy about who maybe I train with. But also it was more about like getting the confidence to speak up and protect myself in jiu-jitsu, because no one there wants to hurt you. Like no one really is going there with bad intentions. Like I've never, like over the 10 years, like I've really never had, well, maybe a couple times where you feel like, oh geez, that was like a little too much, or that felt a little not like a sport, kind of thing. And obviously you can have your own discernment and you don't have to train people that obviously are, not safe for you kind of thing. But I started to realize, like in conversations with other girls that have trained for a really long time too, like Haley McLeod and I get together a lot and train together. We have for years, and Charlene, and we always have these conversations around like, how's the culture at your gym? Like, what's going on? Are you feeling supported? Are you, how's the rolling going? And it was like through those conversations with those girls that I really started to be like, hey, yeah, like, why are we, like, I feel like years ago, we were all advocating for equal treatment on the mats. Excuse me. And then now I've kind of backed away a little bit, excuse me, from that. And it's like, I sort of think of it as like, we're not equal. It's not the same thing. We're not the same body. Yes, you're physically smaller, but also you have a female body. And that's completely different than a male body. Yeah. So even if it's like an equally sized male, you know, we're the same weight, that male is still going to be like 30 to 40% stronger than me. You know, their bone structure is different, their density, everything is just different. The way their mind is working, like everything is completely different. So as a woman training, you're always going into a match, especially if it's someone you're not really familiar with, and you have to feel out like, am I okay here? Am I safe? So you're not really doing jiu-jitsu until you have that level of comfort, that level of trust, that you can like shut that off and go like, okay, no, we're good to roll. And so when you have long-term training partners, like, you know, like this is what it's going to feel like, this is what it's going to be like. And so I was kind of getting to a point before I was able to really speak up about that, of like coming into a training room and being like, ugh, there's 3 people here that I'm like excited to roll with, and the rest is like, I'm just going to be really protecting myself and not really having a fun roll. And so I really started to, like, as I started traveling a bit more and visiting other gyms and having really fun rolls and rolling with more women, it was like, the guys have this all the time. We, like, if I go into a room and I'm like, oh, there's 3 or 4 people that I'm like stoked to roll with, like, that's pretty rare. Like, that's always been pretty rare for me. And that doesn't mean that I've had bad training partners, not at all. But it's just like, there was never any communication around like, how do we do this? How do we make this mutually beneficial? And that's what I'm trying to do now, is like teach men like what we want, what we need. And then so they know, and they're not just feeling this awkward, like, okay, I got to roll with this woman. She's really small. I don't really know what to do, but also she's really good. And I don't really want to get tapped a bunch of times. And so sometimes that can amp up the intensity of the rounds too, is like when you do have good technique and maybe you're getting things, like I find then the strength and the aggression sort of like will elevate. And so you're always having to measure that as a woman in jiu-jitsu. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel
I do.
That, you know, it takes a long time to like develop that trust. And so I, over the last couple of years, and with the support of Haley and Charlie and just all these conversations that we've had, I've started to just advocate for myself. And it's like, no, and also I was also super stubborn when I started training, and I just thought, oh, just be tough. And it's like, you know, treat me the same kind of thing. And now I'm like, no, please don't, because I'm not the same thing. And I think we are different. And I think like, as a culture, like, we've lost a lot of that, where like the males their sort of role is to protect the females. And I think that's what it should feel like in a gym, is that you should feel protected by everybody there. And like, not just males and females, but everybody should be there on the same like team and trying to help each other grow. And so if there's a situation where you have a training partner, you can find out a way that's going to be a mutually beneficial role. And that's what I've been working towards, like I'm working on over the last little bit. And it is opening up way more doors for like, I can train with anybody, because I'm more specific about what that's going to look like and how that will be mutually beneficial. So if it's someone that, excuse me, has 100 pounds on me, which like is very common, like that, I've had lots of training partners that are 100 pounds bigger than me. And I'll be just like, hey, good opportunity for you to play off your back, practice your guard retention. I'm a pretty good guard passer and I move quickly, so that's beneficial for you to work on your guard, and it's beneficial for me to work on my guard passing with you. It's not beneficial for me to practice my bottom half guard with someone that's 100 pounds bigger than me, right? It's just like too much risk for injury. It doesn't work properly. Like, yeah, if it's somebody that's untrained and they're that much bigger than me, I think I'd have a fighting chance, like, to do something. But like, when you're both training jiu-jitsu, it doesn't make sense for you to be the bottom player in that scenario, especially as a female. You know, you're just like, you're so vulnerable. You're even, like we were talking about it yesterday, like when someone puts you in a body triangle, it literally feels like my rib cage is going to break. And I'm like, hey, no, like my bone structure is not the same as you. Like, you can't treat us the same. We can't handle the same amount of pressure. And we also don't just want to be pinned down the whole time. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not fun for anybody. And I think talking about it, like, as a woman too, it also crosses over a lot. Like, I've had a lot of males come to me and, like, that are smaller stature and be like, I love your classes because you actually say, like, do not crush people. Let people move. Like, it's not beneficial to just hold somebody down the whole time. Like, yeah, maybe you're winning or you're up on points or you're going to get submissions, or the other thing is like defending submissions. Like, it drives me crazy if I'm like 2 arms on something and I'm like, I for sure, like, you can't fight this off of someone that was at your equal size. So like, yeah, maybe you're not getting submitted by me, but like, I'm doing the technique correctly and you're just kind of like muscling out of things.
You've
like,
sunk it in. Like,
I'm sure you've everyone's had that experience. And like, yeah, I think everyone should be really trying hard, but I always compare it to like, I've always taught children's classes. So sometimes I roll with the kids, and there'll be a kid that will be like 30 pounds or 20 pounds or like pretty close to my size. And when I'm rolling with them, I just never have this like thing where I'm like, I could crush this kid, you know what I mean? Or I want to get top and I'm going to like crush inside control, or I'm going to like go really hard with them or squeeze things really hard. Like I'm always protective of them. And then I'll be like in a situation where I'm rolling with a guy that's a lot bigger, and I'm just like, how does that not feel so weird for you to be crushing me right now?
And I think, do you find like as you level up, that target becomes like it's
Absolutely.
like more intensity?
Yeah.
It seems
yeah,
as
with
though,
some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my biggest nightmare is like fresh white belt guys. Like I barely will roll with them now. Of course, at my gym, like I do roll with all the new people, but we have so many conversations about like what to do and what not to do. So we just talk about it. So, because I think, like I said, like nobody has the intention that they want to hurt anybody,
Right.
but they sort of don't know what to do. And then when you get in the heat of the roll, especially in the beginning, when you don't really have good control over your, your hormones that are surging through you, because it's like the adrenaline is going, their cortisol is up, and it's like you're in fight or flight.
Right.
And so they lose that kind of like, it's not a real fight.
Who am I with right now?
Exactly. Excuse me. And we talk a lot about that, and I'll say, so just be careful of this. And if you're not breathing at the same rate as them, or if you're finding you're huffing and puffing and they're just like smiling, like you're probably going way too hard.
Right.
So we just talk about that. And I'm like, if you have someone that's smaller than you or a woman, you're not going to put your full pressure down. You only need to use as much resistance as is necessary, and any more than that is a waste. And I sort of teach it from that perspective as well, of like try to be very efficient. And so if you grab a grip on my arm, you don't need to be squeezing me so hard that your fingers are indenting in my arm and I'm going to have a bruise on my wrist just from your wrist control. I'm not even trying to get away, and you're squeezing me that hard. That just like shows that like you're overreacting to what's going on. So I'm always like, dial that back, because you're wasting energy there and you're bruising my arm. Like, so I try to like look at it from that perspective and really have it that like people are getting into like flowy, good rounds where there's a lot of movement, and it's not like you're crushed for 4 minutes and it's like, okay, I survived that and move on. And I hope a lot of women can start to do that and start to advocate for themselves and learn the language of like, what do you say when you feel like you're going to get, or you're getting smashed, or someone is smashing you? What are the words? Like, how do you do that? And like, and then even more importantly, are you backed up by the leadership at your gym, which I think is really important. And that's something that every time I get together with women who do jiu-jitsu, which is quite common, we have these same conversations around like, what are we needing? We need to voice what we're needing, and we need to be backed up by the leadership of wherever we are.
Yeah, I think that communication key is so important for the longevity and to improve to allow more women to feel comfortable in those spaces. Like, there's clearly a big difference in the amount of men that train versus the amount of women.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a huge factor. It's just whether or not, like, am I going to be able to move tomorrow? Like, am I going to be able to use my limbs? Like,
and you don't, that's the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is you're creating your own discomfort. You're creating your own challenge in your life. And that ultimately will, trickle out into your life and decrease your level of stress. And you're also increase your resistance with all of your stressful kind of encounters that you have. So jiu-jitsu is very good for you in that sense. It seems counterintuitive that putting yourself in a really stressful situation actually helps you with your level of stress in your life, but it really does.
Yeah.
And everybody that trains does that, because you just look at anyone who gets hurt. They're not really scared to get hurt. What they're scared of is taking time off of training.
Right.
Like that's everybody's worst nightmare that trains jiu-jitsu, because it's like, how do I fulfill this need if I can't train? Because anyone that's been injured knows there's no supplemental exercise that feels the same as jiu-jitsu or activity, whatever it is, because it's about the connections. It's about so much more than just physical exercise. So that's really what people's fears are around. With,
like
with getting
I
injured.
fear injury because like it's like this is what keeps my mental health in check. 100%. This is what keeps me happy and feeling good. And if I'm not able to train, then I lose that. And that is.
It's
I've
very
heard
scary.
many people say that
So
that's scary.
Yeah. And so I've always, with my nursing background and just kind of having that mindset of how I'm kind of wired. When people get hurt, I'm always the one to be like, hey, check it in. Hey, how are you doing? Like,
I love hearing that too.
Please come into the gym. Like, come hang out. Like, I know it sucks. We're thinking about you. Can't wait to have you back kind of thing. And people are like, yes. Because it's quite a drop, you know, when you have something that's helping you to cope or helping you to kind of stay stabilized, and then that gets taken away. It can be very destabilizing to not have that, especially if you have a serious injury that needs surgery or something like that. It can be super tricky. And so I talk about that at my gym. I talk about, like, you don't want to feel what it feels like to hurt somebody badly, where they have to go out of training and understand, like, what you've taken away from them.
Right.
So train in a way that's, you know, accidents are going to happen. People get bumps, bruises, black eyes, like all of it. And, like, anytime I get bumped like that and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, if you get a black eye or something, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's totally fine. I would way rather that than an injury that makes me not be able to train.
Right.
That makes me upset, especially if it's something that could have been avoided. And a lot of injuries a few injuries that I've had, like, definitely could have been avoided. And it was just someone going way too hard, and you're like, dude, now I can't train, and I can't open my water bottle, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And it's like, it affects your whole life. And so we have to think about it more. We have to put more energy into that, because it's not, once somebody has access to jiu-jitsu and they're using it as a tool in their life, it really sucks to have that taken away. So we should be trying to prevent that as much as possible. And also, I think just open communication with the men and actually telling them what you need is, like, really helpful in life and in jiu-jitsu. It's like, we just expect people to be able to read our minds, and it's like, and then you're, like, pissed that you're not getting what you need or what you want, or you feel like, you know, but it's like, but did you say anything? And mostly it's no.
Yeah.
So a lot of these conversations that I have with women, and it's like, this is, like, what the training atmosphere is like at my gym, or this is what the culture's like. And I'm like, well, have you said anything? And it's like, well, no. And then a lot of people that I hear from have spoken up about issues, but it's not validated, it's not heard, and nothing changes. And it's like, well, then maybe you're not in the right spot, you know what I mean? Or maybe we just need to do more to, like, educate people about, like, how to make it a symbiotic relationship between the males and the females at the gym, small people, big people, everybody, so that there's ways that you can do. Like, we have another game that I always learned when I started doing jiu-jitsu, of, like, playing chess, where you do one move, I do one move, and you're trying to, like, develop your game that way. So there's, like, lots of different things that you can do if you're, you know, end up getting paired with a training partner that's, like, it's not going to be just, like, an open role because of the size difference or whatever it is. Maybe they're too new, you're training for a competition, you don't want to put the risk there of having an injury or whatever. But there's lots of things that you can do. Like I said, having the larger training partner train off their back, and you always play top game. Like, there's so many easy adjustments that you can do, and that makes both people more comfortable. Because, I mean, I don't know what it feels like as a man or as a larger man to go and roll with a black belt woman who's small. Like, but I'm sure it feels kind of weird.
Yeah, I would think they probably are. I think there's kind of two extremes. There's people who are like, well, you're a black belt.
Yeah, and it's
hold
like,
your own.
You should be able to handle everything. And it's like, well, yeah.
And then you get the people who are like, oh my God, like, I don't want to touch you.
Yeah.
Like, they're, you know, and I shouldn't say that, because there are people who are comfortable in between. I've got great training partners. Yeah. But initially with new people, there's probably, like, kind of more one side or the other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where they're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I remember starting and being like, those first rolls that you do where you're like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. And it feels awful, you know, and that is part of it. And it's part of the learning process. But I think it's nice to just tell people, like, maybe just use this as your goal for right now. This is, like, one little thing. Here's, like, look at this concept. Like, just try to get around my legs and stay around my legs. And they're like, okay. They can kind of digest that and use that as a tool instead of, like, because jiu-jitsu is so vast. Even now, as a brown belt, I'm still like, oh my God, I have so much to learn. Like, I barely know anything. Like, I honestly feel that way. I'm not saying I'm not good at jiu-jitsu, but it's like, I honestly feel like I have so much to learn. Like, I look at people who have a memory for, you know, all of these new moves. Like, Miles McPhee is one of my best buddies, and, like, we've trained together right from the get-go. And, like, his mind for jiu-jitsu and, like, other training partners I had was just like, I'm just like, how do you remember everything? Like, I can't. Like, once I know something and I get good at it, I have it in my game and it can come pretty automatically. But I don't have a huge repertoire of techniques, you know, that, you know, or learn all of these different guard systems. And I think I got really lost in that at Blue Belt, where I was like, I need to be good at everything. And then I kind of realized that was not possible, especially for me and the way I'm wired. And I kind of let go of that. And I was like, no, just work on the shit you're good at, develop a little bit of game around that, and just kind of keep going from there, see what looks fun to you. And I've let go of a lot of, like, needing to know everything. And I feel like I improved a lot from doing that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like so much can be thrown at you. It's like, find the things that work for your game, work for your body style. And,
exactly.
And, like, finesse it to be what you want it.
Yeah.
And training at different academies, you kind of pick up.
Right.
Like, we were talking about how, like, learning from different instructors and being like, ooh, I like that style, or I like that style.
Yeah.
So
when I started out, it was interesting. Like, I learned like Gracie fundamentals, and I felt really grateful for having that background. And like in self-defense jiu-jitsu was where I really started. And it, you know, it could get a bit monotonous at the time because I really wanted to compete and I loved rolling. And I was like, we spent a lot of time, you know, when I first started learning very good fundamentals. And I'm really grateful for that now. But looking back, I'm like, you know, maybe there was a better way that would have been more efficient for me going through as a smaller person. And it wasn't until I started competing like internationally, going to bigger tournaments, where I would go around to other gyms and do little training camps. And the first time I think that I did that was going over to Halifax BJJ, and I got to train with Christine Fader and a couple of the girls. I remember Morgan, sweet little Morgan. I've trained against her. I've competed with her a bunch of times, and she's a sweetheart. But we've talked about this story quite a few times. But I went there. I had no like smaller girls that I would train with. And I was training with the girls, and Christine was like just showing me. She's like, she'd stop me in places and be like, well, do this here. And I'd be like, oh my God, like my whole world just opened up. And I was like, oh, there's techniques that are for small people. I didn't know that. And like, was like, everything started to change. And like little things that I would pick up from learning from other women were what really like helped me to have gains in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Where the rest of it was like a pretty tough slugging it out, like smashed on the bottom and just surviving. And like, you know, I was obviously younger at the time, but I was 36 when I started training jiu-jitsu. So I still wasn't like a young person, like starting out. And so I was just like sore all the time. And then so I started picking up things. And I remember Morgan and I went to roll that first time, and I forget what I did, but I like tossed her like pretty far. And I was like, oh my gosh, sorry. Because I just had never felt someone move easily. And even like last night rolling with Katie, I was like, geez, like when you go to like elevate with your legs, she's gone. And like usually, you know, I've had someone, I'm training with someone that's like, you know, 40, 50 pounds bigger than me, and like elevations don't work. Like, I mean, I can make a little space, but I'm not like sending them off of me. So it's like always like adapting to that. So it was really when I started training at other areas and like learning from different people, and just like it opened up my world quite a bit. And then we did a lot of like independent study. Like I was really lucky to be training with Miles, like coming up through, and we did a lot of like drilling together, and kind of made our own little group where we were like focused on competition, and it became more adaptable to me. Lance Campbell, also like my coach now, and he worked with me on a lot of different things, and like, hey, this might be really good for your game, and it became like more individual to me. And that's when I started to really have success and like love competing and like have a lot more fun at jiu-jitsu. And so then going around training at different gyms is like that now what I love to do. So when we travel, we got to train in Mexico quite a bit last year, which was like amazing, having so many women that you could train with, and just to see, like, to be in a full room where you're looking around, it's like I can roll with anybody, and it's going to be like fun and like a super like fair, challenging, really good roll. And I'm like, when I go back to like your home gym, you're like, that's like the guys have that every time they go, and it's like something they don't even think about, that we're like, you know, for me to get to have like a training camp, like I have to bring the girls over or go to Antigonish or go wherever and train with Haley and Charlene and those guys. That's like what we've always done for training camps, because you just don't really have the same pool. And like I would always pick like a few of the guys that were like fairly small but like moved dynamically and were good to train with, you know, for when I was like training for a competition or something. But then when you get into your match with another girl who's like you, it's like, whoa, it feels completely different. And so I just never really had that, where I had like, you know, another female that was like close to my size and at my belt level. You know? I
don't know if you feel this, but I feel like because of that like camaraderie, even though we've competed against each other, it just feels like an instant friendship, and like it's women's empowerment, like a perfect example of like how we empower each other, and just like, you know, it's really, really nice and refreshing compared to other, you know, like workplaces where there's like that like negative competition, or like, you know, like an unhealthy type of competition versus like, you know, like let's see who can beat each other this time. But
it's
like
wild.
Like you build each other up. And
my friends outside of jiu-jitsu are always like, you're friends with her? Because they'll be like, you know, watch my match if it's on, you know, it's, you know, something, a pay-per-view or whatever, and they're like, expect that you don't like the person that I'm like, no, some of my dearest friends are people that I have fought in competition like lots of times. Like Haley McLeod and I have fought each other like I don't know how many times, but countless, and she is like one of my dearest friends.
It's
and
really
it was
cool.
really the first time that we met. We were in the same bracket. It was kind of like we found each other, and she was so nervous. I remember I just gave her a hug beforehand, and she was like, I don't know what you did to me when you hugged me, but like we were just like so close ever since that moment. And through the years we've had so many matches, and like we train really hard together, but we just like love each other so much. And same with you guys. Like it's not like that. For the most part. I mean, sometimes obviously you're going to have competitors that aren't of that same mindset, where it is more like not about that, and that's okay too. There's a place for that as well. But I'm so close with so many people that I have fought against, you know, in competition, and it doesn't have to be negative. It's usually a very positive experience.
Well, and I think it makes it more comfortable for women to start competition. Like I said, I've always admired you. I've watched you compete. I'm like, oh, wow. And I remember like one of our competitions, and you came up, and I'm like sitting there, I'm awkward. I'm like, I don't know what to do right now. You come up and give me a big hug, and I'm instantly at ease. It's like, you know, I'm just like, wow. So I think it really promotes the sport for women, and I think it makes it like a much healthier space for,
I do too.
like, for it to grow and get, you know, for us to get better.
Yeah, and we were definitely talking last night about some ideas about how to get more of us back competing, and like what are the challenges that we're facing that are sort of limiting, I think, the exposure that women's jiu-jitsu is getting, because there's tons of like very good jiu-jitsu players who aren't competing. Like, let's be honest, there are more opportunities now certainly than there ever have been, and it is something where people are starting to listen and talk. Like, you know, I love the Breakthrough organization. I'll compete for them anytime I'm asked and there's a good matchup. I'll always be going for those brackets. However, it is out of my weight category. There are two divisions that they have. It's under 145. I was the first contender for that one. I can hold my own there, but it's not my division. I'm like 130 pounds on a good day. So it's, you know, we just need more brackets. And I understand, like, well, for you as well, one of the owners of Road Grappling, and I've had lots of conversations with Chris and you guys about how do we do this? How do we make more brackets so that it's accessible and fair for us, but there's not the numbers.
Right.
But then it's like, oh, then what do you do? Because I think really that's why a lot of women, especially the higher belts, aren't competing, is because you have to go in a division that's like not yours.
Right.
Like, I'm okay with not fighting masters. Like, I know I have to give up that. It's not like I'm going to have a masters division locally. Like, there's not that many of us that are, you and I. So unless Haley's younger too, but like she's at least, you know, close to our size and things like that. But that was what was happening. Like, over the years, it was like I was having the same matches with the same people over and over and over. Yeah. And it's like, when there's a size difference and you're both really good at jiu-jitsu, it's like, it's not really fair.
Yeah.
You know, no matter what you do, because you're so equal, you're so level.
And I think the risk for injury
is very high.
Goes way up.
Absolutely. So, you know, there's Abby from Summerside. I've had tons of matches with Abby, and it's always a tough battle back and forth. And we have great matches, but it's like, you kind of do get tired of like traveling to a competition, paying the entry fee, and like having the same match with the same person like over and over and over again. So it does make it hard. But for me, as I got older and became like more risk averse to jiu-jitsu, and I don't really want to throw my hat in the ring when it's like, you know, 150 pound bracket anymore, but I still really want to be in the mix, but there's just not really the people there. So like, we were talking about this last night of like, how do we get, and I think maybe the women have to come together in some way. We do have different groups where we all talk to each other, like the Women That Fight organization, like Sarah's running that, and there's always an open dialogue. I think like we could do something where we're like, hey, here's a bunch of us that are, you know, under 130 or whatever, and we would love to have a little bracket. Or even like with the super fights is a really good idea where you can show, you know, two equally kind of matched people and have a good show. Because when you have someone, then there's like a pretty significant size difference. It's, I don't know, I don't want to be judgmental, but it's not really beautiful jiu-jitsu.
Right.
It's kind of not that. It's something else, and it becomes like, for me at least, like in the last years, I felt like a lot of my matches that I had where it was not equally sized, it didn't feel like a fair fight at all. It was more like a physical, like, I don't know, not jiu-jitsu, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, and so then you're just like, you feel like you suck because you're like, I didn't even get to do anything that I can do because like you were so overtaken by the size difference or the strength difference, and you're just kind of like, and also I think too, and I don't know if it's just like a product of like the culture at different gyms, that like the aggression level has really turned up, I feel too. And maybe I'm just becoming more of a baby, like not a baby, but like more just not into that
No,
kind of thing.
I agree with you in
And
that.
when you get injured a bunch of times, like I've had my nose broken in competition, like I've had like so many things happen, especially recently, and a lot of the competitions that I went into, which was a fault of my own, have gone into injured, you know, because I would never say no, and I would always be like, oh, I'm going to show up anyways. Like, you know, when I was up for the contender of the belt for the under 145 division for breakthrough, like I had a broken thumb in my right hand. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? You know, but I still did it. Like I should have said no.
Right.
So that was on me for sure. And I was like part of my learning, because I was always like, no, I can do everything. I won't ever back out kind of thing. But now I'm like, that you're an idiot. Like, how did you think you were going to win that match? Like we were equally matched anyways. And like, if you don't have your right hand,
makes it pretty
what are you
hard.
going to do? But like, that's my bad kind of thing. But it's like but it was such a good opportunity. I was like, that's actually where I wanted to do it so much. And I don't really get those opportunities to have that kind of bracket. So, but I think we do need to, as the women, kind of come together and find ways that we can be like, hey, here's 5 of us that would love to have a bracket somewhere who can, like, I'm sure the breakthrough guys would be happy to have us I know that I've talked to them, had the conversations with Justice and Joel about this, and they're like, hey, if we had the numbers to do a smaller bracket, like we're game to do it kind of thing. So
That's cool.
That's cool. But also we have to do our part and kind of show up too.
Right.
Yeah. But I think super fights are a really good way. Like Haley and I were saying, we would love to have a super fight again. And just so that we can show, like, this is what, you know, high level jiu-jitsu kind of looks like when it's an equally matched thing. And it's not someone just kind of being pinned or being held a lot for their match, or being really having to worry about their safety kind of a lot in the match. The jiu-jitsu looks very different to 2 people who are trust of each other and they are equally matched. It's like,
and getting to see that technical ability and like
watching like us roll last night, how we were just like, it's all over the place. And it's like, whose legs are whose and what's going on kind of thing. And it's like, I don't find that when it's such a size spread that you get that style of jiu-jitsu. And it's unfortunate because it makes it look like women aren't as good at jiu-jitsu as men. And I think that's not true.
True.
Yeah.
I also think
I'm on about
in the long run, with more women teaching and instructing, I think we're going to build the numbers of women in the sport. And I think down the road, we'll start to see the benefit. We may not benefit from it, but down the road, we'll start to see that there will be more more women on the mats, and therefore more competitors and that kind of thing. So I love seeing like a woman open her own gym and like instruct and, you know, build that community.
It's very cool because like I always, Melissa Adams is one of my mentors and idols in the sport, and I think she's done so much, and she doesn't compete often now, but she has recently, and we've had lots of chats around what are the barriers, like what is kind of holding her back. And it's like, she's the same thing. She was like the first black belt, right? And she is very small. She's smaller than us, and you know, and it is like you have a target on your back, and it's like it feels very unsafe. And I always admired the way she handled herself and was like, I don't put myself in those situations. And I was like, oh, well, then I wouldn't get to train. Like I wouldn't get to train with anybody if I, you know, but I had to learn how to do that. And she really showed me that, like, no, you don't put yourself in unsafe situations. And I was like,
it's
good funny. For you. And that's really helped me just kind of grow a backbone.
When we interviewed her, that was one of the things. I was brand new white belt. Patrick, my husband, was like, we got to go to Fredericton and like Melissa. And
she's coming in 2 weeks. I'm so excited.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And with our interview with Melissa, I told her, I was like, you know, I remember hearing you say, she actually stopped my husband and said like, well, you're going too hard. There's a big size difference. And I remember being like, we can do that? Like we can tell people like, whoa. And, you know, like you see, like you're starting new and you're seeing someone advocate for themselves and you're like, okay, like that's okay. And then it comes back to what you were saying, like feeling supported and doing that.
And as being opposed, backed, You have to be backed by the leadership, because then it's just kind of like, well, she's just being a girl, or she's just being
if you can't take it, don't come.
It's like but no, that's not
like,
the
I want to be here.
It needs to be, because like everybody at the gym serves a purpose. Like your white belts are serving a purpose. Like they're there learning, but it's like somebody that the higher belts can practice their new techniques on, or they can really, you know, work on specific things with. You need white belts in your gym. You need everybody. And I think you need women in your gym. If you have a gym and you don't have a strong female membership, I think you do need to have a hard look at like, what is the culture in your gym?
Right.
Or, you know, where's the leadership? Are there mentors there for women? Who are they being protected? Are these things being talked about? And I think that's a really good check for what's the climate of your gym kind of like. And so I think it should be, if you're not, then you know, it would be a good idea to look at what's going on. Why aren't they there? Talk to the women. ask kind of what they need, and it's just like, it's so important.
Yeah.
You know, so having people like Melissa and Haley, like all of these girls, Christine, Fader, same thing, like just advocate for themselves and show you that it is okay to say, like, you are going too hard, you know, or that is too much pressure, whatever. It doesn't matter what your level is. It doesn't mean that I'm not as good at jiu-jitsu, or even if I'm brown, black belt, whatever I am, it doesn't mean that I can overcome 40 pounds of extra weight and then whatever percentage of extra body strength that you have.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have to.
Right.
You know, because
it's also really nice to see women not just teaching women's only classes, that we can actually teach male students as well. Like, you know, so often you're put in that box where it's like
like a novelty.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, no, like this is where you belong.
Yeah.
It's like,
I've been asked a lot to teach like women's self-defense or women-only classes, and I think it's a good thing. However, I didn't ever want to get put in that box where I only teach women's jiu-jitsu, because I think doesn't matter. Like, women who are good teachers and are, you know, have a lot of technique and a good way of teaching are very successful teachers, I think. Right. I've always had a lot of good comments on my classes, especially for people that are smaller and like men as well, where say like, that's awesome, that I never thought to do that, or, you know, it's just like the whole I'm a very conceptual teacher about concepts and the way how to think about things. And it's like that sort of has a big impact I can see over time that I have. But I have a lot of different techniques that I'll do when I do get into a role. I think it's good to talk about, and you guys can probably share like what you guys do when you find yourself in one of those situations where you're like, eesh, I'm not feeling like safe, or I'm feeling like I'm just defending myself and I really can't switch on my like jiu-jitsu flow, which is how I love to train, because I'm in this like self-protection. This is not jiu-jitsu. This is me being like, I'm trying not to get injured here. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys do. But I usually talk before I have a match with somebody that I haven't rolled with. I'll be like, had you trained with women? Like, are you used to that? In Charlottetown especially, we would have a lot of visitors come to the gym, and I love training with new people, but you always don't know what you're going to get until the roll starts. And so it is scary. And like, you do, like I said, you become risk averse and like almost develop some anxiety about training with new people. So I would always say that first, like, are you used to training with women? Like, how do you kind of go? Or, you know, and especially because I mostly train no-gi, so sometimes you don't even know what belt they are. So I'll ask that too, because I want to know. Like,
how long
I think
have you been
it's
training?
fair. Yeah, I think it's fair to ask people, like, what belt you're in. It's not like, oh, how good are you? That's not what I mean. But I kind of want to know what I'm dealing with before I get into the role. And then I'll say, like, yeah, try to keep it nice and flowy, but I'll let you know. I'll just say, like, I'll let you know if it's too much. And usually they're like, thank you.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to smash you.
Yeah.
You know, especially when they're visiting. And if they do, like, well, then maybe you don't want to roll with them. But so I'll tell them kind of like, I'll let you know, like, if it's too much. And then if I am in a position, I'll kind of be like, oh, yeah, too much pressure, and give them opportunity to back off and go again. If it kind of happens again, I'll be like, yeah, like a little bit more forcefully be like, yeah, no, that's way too much. Like, I literally can't move, or I can't whatever. And then my next technique that I'll do is, like, I call it the dead fish. Do you guys ever do that? Where you're like under somebody, you're like, you're not letting me move. You can't do anything. And I'll just go like limp. And Haley taught me this one, and we call it the dead fish. So you just kind of go dead, and then people will sort of like, they'll kind of like let off to look at you to be like, what the hell's going on? And then I'll just move and get out, and I'll be like, yeah, no, you can't. And then that's kind of like the, dude, that's way too much.
Thank you for that. I'm going to try that.
You're welcome. There's going to be so many women doing the dead fish now. But
I love that.
And
we'll have to hashtag it.
Yeah, I think the communication aspect is more important. And just knowing, like you said, when you heard Melissa say that to your husband, like that's good.
And I went home and told Patrick, I was like, I hope you don't mind I mentioned you in the podcast. And he's like, no. He's like, that's good. You know, he's like, and yeah, like he would be the last person to try and like harm someone. But
absolutely.
Like I was like, I love that. Like I needed to see that is an okay thing to do and say, and like advocate for yourself and your safety. And
it's just about learning the language, like, because I think it's mostly as women, like, it is really hard to speak up for yourself. It is hard to say no to anything. Like, and a lot of women, like we talked about yesterday when we were, I don't know if we'll get into kind of the other side of it with Jaya and with like the healing work that I'm kind of doing, but it's about like finding your voice, advocating for yourself. And a lot of women just like really don't have the ability to do that. They don't feel like they can. And even if they do, it's like, what do you say? You don't want to sound like you're being a baby, or you're like, you know, wanting to be, you know, like special treatment kind of thing. But it's also like, but yeah, you should have special treatment kind of, because you're a woman doing this sport where it's like, there's no other sports where men and women physically train together. Like you're not going to go in a rugby match and play against guys. Right. So, I mean, if you did, they can't play the same way that they would if they're playing against a team of men. Right? Like, so if you think of it like that, it is crazy to think that we should be treated the same because we're not the same thing.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
I've never really viewed it that way
Yeah.
because jiu-jitsu is always sold to you as like it's a small person sport.
Mm-hmm. And it is.
Right.
But there's a lot of big people in it.
But when you're both trained,
right,
it's different because like you're both coming with a skill set, but you also have this skill set that I
Right.
have no way to access.
Exactly. You get that.
Not
You
by
have that
technique.
advantage.
So it's like, yeah, if someone has more technique than you, then yeah, you're going to be at a disadvantage for them, but you have the ability to learn
Right.
and to grow your technique. But I'm not going to be too like I can't get
Right.
stronger and bigger. Like I've tried everything. If I could have like Vince from Durable Grapple, he would have made me bigger and stronger because he trained me for a long time and like really worked, and it does help a ton. But I'm never going to be a 170-pound man. Like I'm never going to feel like that.
Right.
So. And also, like, as you're aging in the sport, you have to accommodate for it, that your body doesn't repair as quickly. Like, you really, really have to invest a lot into your recovery and to how you train. Like, I do yoga twice a week now. I teach at my gym. And it's like all of these things, like, you literally have to do to be able to continue training in the way that I train. So it's like
I really want
lightly.
to dive into your other business as well. But I'm wondering, with the time check, we're probably going to have to, I feel like this is going to be a part 2.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to rush it. I
Sure,
like the
yeah.
energy and the other side of things as well is just, yeah.
Well, I know because unfortunately Madeline has to go and teach. However, I mean, we certainly, if we can't do it today, we can do like Zoom call and like video you in to talk about the experience, because we also we're grateful to have the opportunity to have a spinal energetics session with Madeline, and I won't get into my stuff.
It was intense. It was
intense,
good.
but it was good. It was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for participating in that. It's been so fun to have you over for the weekend. When this started to kind of come about, I was like, well, we could do this, and we could do this, and we kind of overpacked our time a little bit, which I do. But yeah, I'd be really happy, and I think we could really, to do it justice, I think we do need more time than what we have to get ready to go teach the little kiddies at jiu-jitsu. But it's something that I'm not really sure what it's going to look like moving forward, because it's something that's totally new. But I am an energy practitioner. I do spinal energetics. It's called the modality that I use. I'm a Reiki master, a teacher. So I do work with people with their nervous systems, trying to settle things down a little bit, because a lot of people are in this like stuck in this perpetual state of fight or flight, and because of like compounding stress, I treat a lot of people that have PTSD, just really people that are overwhelmed with their lives and not able to experience the full range of emotions anymore. So they're really stuck in kind of like a numb spot where everything else is kind of shut down because it's like too much to kind of handle. So, and knowing how well jiu-jitsu pairs with that, we've kind of created this new gym, this new area where with my business, Jiu Wellness, I use my gym quite a bit for group sessions. Like we're having a somatic movement session on Monday evening here, where a friend of mine that does somatic dance, she's putting on a session, and we're doing it through the gym. So Monday evenings, we're always doing something that's like a healing focus.
That's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah, so we're using like the space is really like a dual function kind of thing. And also it's been really interesting to see like the new members that are starting, they're kind of like, wait, what is it that you do? And that's like, it's intriguing, and they're kind of catching it. And it's like, also the level of trust is there because they see who I am as a practitioner and as a teacher there. And it's like, yeah, I also do this on the side, and that it seems pretty woo-woo and out there for sure. And if you've watched videos of spinal energetics or what I do, it is hard to grasp. It's hard to kind of get your head around. But it's becoming more mainstream. It's becoming more common.
I was going to ask if your like experience with working like in like a hospital versus like, I feel like there is more, people are being more open to these outside like options like to help with healing.
There's that. I think a big reason that that's happening is that people are very, very unwell, like as a whole. And so there's a lot more people that are really, really at the end of their rope, and where they're like, I have tried all of the things. I've done the medication regimes. I'm not against medication at all. I think it's a super important, vital part of like healing. And a lot of people wouldn't be here without medications, but it's not the only answer, and it's usually not the full answer for any kind of lasting solution. So it's something that's really important to look at and to have more of a dialogue around, and that's a normal thing, that, and like also to see that even people who are successful, you know, you might look at somebody as, like you said, for me, like as a jiu-jitsu competitor, you're like somebody I looked up to, but like I was super struggling all that whole time.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. With my mental health, with my family, with different challenges that were going on. I experienced a really, really significant caregiver burnout after my child had a significant physical illness, which merged into a mental illness, and the recovery period of all of that, and, you know, just different experiences that I've had over the years. It's like you can only continue being like a bulldozer and steamrolling and like trying your hardest through your life. You can only do that for so long before you do eventually run out of steam, and then it's like, then where do you turn? And that's what happened with me. It was like, okay, everything kind of got broken down, and it was like, what am I going to do now? And that's when I really started to turn back towards the natural healing modalities, and I was like, okay, this is actually helping me. I'm actually starting to be able to put my life back together, to build pieces, and to find out like who the hell I am, and like what do I want, and, you know, letting go of the whole people pleaser persona and that whole part of you that you've built since you're like a kid is really, really challenging. And challenging in a sense is that you're not going to be as well liked as you are, and you do have to let go of things and change things in your life as you sort of heal and change and become more genuinely who you're supposed to be. But you also then, the relationships that do stay and are there are way more genuine. There's so much depth to it, and you attract like a lot of really good quality relationships, learning experiences, and people into your life.
Yeah.
So, and that's why you guys are here. So
I think part of when we talked at the very beginning about like jiu-jitsu and how like as a community and like it's so good for mental health, it's going back to that collective.
yes.
You know, and that is healing. It's when you are your authentic self and people are open and accepting of who you truly are. You're not putting on a mask. You're not pretending to be something.
We're
it's
all
like,
a mess.
this is what you get.
Let's just be real. We're all pretty messy. And like, I think that there's also value in that too. It's like, you don't have to be perfect before you have anything to offer.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, had a real flaw in my, my psyche was like, I was like this perfectionist mentality. And I just was like, I can't do that until I'm perfect at it. Like I wouldn't teach any jiu-jitsu techniques that I like basically couldn't hit rolling or couldn't do whatever. And I'm like, I had to let go of that. It's like, that's stupid. Yeah. You know, you can teach things, you can be of service to people when you're not perfect yourself, and actually more so. And the more I've let go of that and been like, hey, I don't have my shit together really at all. Like in some ways I do, but like I'm still struggling. Everything is a work in progress. And that's how I come at people now. But maybe in this sense, you know, in this area of life, maybe I'm down the road a little further than you and I can help you with that. But in this other area, you're ahead of me. And like, it's not about who's ahead or behind. It's like, how can we help each other to like get the experiences that you need to like learn and grow. And that's basically what it's all about. And that's what Jaya, that's what my work is all about, is helping people let go of the patterns that they have usually from childhood that are not serving them anymore and are in fact making them quite sick, and starting to recalibrate and really look at like, why do I always react in that one way? You know, and it's because it's your conditioned response. So what we're doing with spinal energetics is actually interacting with the nervous system to help sort of reset, sort of take out some of the tension that's stored in the body, so that you can actually find out like, what do you actually want? How would you actually respond if you had safety, if you had trust, all of those things. So it's about, you know, it's a long process, or it's like it's very in depth. It's not black and white, and it's not something that you come and do this and your life is automatically magically better. It's not. We talked about that a lot yesterday, but it opens up space for transformation. Transformation is not easy, it's work. So that's like actually what Jaya actually means is congruence.
I was going to ask you how you came up with the name.
Yeah, when I was studying for spinal energetics, I was learning about the concept of Jaya, which means congruence, which means that you are responsible for your experience. So what you're getting in your life is a direct representation of what's going on internally for you. Wow. And it's a hard thing to kind of come to terms with, but it's very true. So
we're in control of our path.
And so it's about being very intentional and aware of what you're doing, what your thoughts are, what your patterns are, and actually being able to then start to take a step back and be like, hey, shit, yeah, that's not really working so good for me, or I keep having this. And like for me, it was like the caregiver. I was like the caregiver to everybody, and I expected very little back in return. So I was doing that in my family life, in romantic relationships, everything. I was like, give, and take nothing back. And it's like, it leaves you so depleted, and over time, resentful and bitter, and like, you know, just a mess. Right. And that's what spinal energetics really helped me to start to change. And like through jiu-jitsu, now I'm finding the ways that it's like, yeah, you can really show up more as your authentic self in jiu-jitsu. And it's like the connections are almost better now,
I
and like
love
the
that.
teaching is coming along better, and it's like you're seeing that you can be an example by being a mess.
Love it.
Because you're improving and you're always working on it and you're open about it, kind of thing. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Very cool.
This is like the perfect spot so we don't make you late for your class. But thank you so much for taking this time, and we'll have you back on the show. And
yeah, can't wait to
we're
be back.
so happy to be here in your space and looking forward to our class this afternoon
Yeah.
with the guest instructor,
Yes.
Katie.
I know.
Foley.
I was excited to do your class
I know.
when you asked me, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you guys here, and I asked Katie to teach today. I'm excited to have her come and teach. This is something we really want to foster in our gym, is a lot of exchange.
Yeah.
So in my work as a practitioner now and with my own business, I do quite a few energy exchanges where, I barter with people, like I'll swap this service for this service kind of thing, and we're getting into that a lot more, and I love the way that works.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about, you guys have been here for the overnight, and we did yoga class, we had open mat last night, we're training, doing all of these things, and you're like, well, what can we do? And I'm like, yeah, well, if you want to teach,
I love
cool,
that. Thank
come
you.
and
I'm
teach.
flattered.
And
Like,
it gives me a little bit of break too, because I have a lot of the teaching load at the gym right now as we're developing other instructors and kind of like seeing how all of this is going to go. But like I said, I would be happy to come and visit your gym, do the
Love
same
that.
kind of thing.
Absolutely.
If there's anyone that is open to healing work and we want to set up a little session that we
I'd
can
love to do that.
something like that. But I'm happy to come over and teach and like share what I know with your gym as well. So, and congratulations also to you and your husband on starting your gym.
Yeah, it's exciting.
This is really, really cool. And you and your partner as well in the jiu-jitsu community having Rogue, it's so neat to see like all of these
That
couples
growth.
that are, doing it together, because I think that's what's really going to change the culture, where it's like, obviously if you're in business with your partner and you're the two that are running the gym, you're probably going to be backed by your partner with what you're saying and supported. And so it's going to help all of this side of it, that some of the struggles that we've all experienced over our time in jiu-jitsu really start to change. Same thing with Haley and Dylan at Woodshop Jiu-Jitsu in Antigonish, another couple that are starting a gym. Melissa has her business partner as well. And so it's like you're starting to see a shift. Like that's a lot of female ownership.
It is. Yeah,
That's
it's
in there.
exciting.
And it's
Yes.
I think it just opens up more ground for more women to start training, but also to not just train, but to train in a way that's mutually beneficial for everybody. And also I think this is in no way like bashing men or men
No.
in jiu-jitsu at all. It's about let's open up some conversation so that we can all be more comfortable and all receive more benefit from it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's what it's all about. It's not about anybody's being a bad training partner or anything like that. It's
No.
not it at all. It's just that we have to talk about how can we make this work, because like we said, it's there's nothing really to compare it to.
Right.
There's no other sports where this is kind of the case that are like a physical contact where you're at risk.
Right.
So let's just change the way we're looking at it, change the way we're thinking about it. No woman also wants to be super babied in a role either. I don't
Right.
want you to be scared, and so there's definitely a spectrum of how you need to train with them. So I think start having conversations in your own gym. It will be my recommendation to the women. Talk about it. Talk about it with the leadership at your gym. What are kind of the rules around training with women, and is it talked about? Do you guys teach the men what we want or what we should do? What are the do's and don'ts? Because a lot of people just aren't aware, and nobody talks about it. So it's not a thing that they know. So I think that if anything comes out of that, it's give the women a voice to say kind of what they want. Give the men some pointers of try this, try that. Here's some different things that we can do. It's kind of like Goldilocks porridge. We don't want to go too
Yeah.
late, but we don't want you to go too hard. It's just think of us
Or is
as
it just
your
right?
sister or somebody that you care about and you want to do well. And yeah, you might have to tap to a girl 4 or 5 times in a round, but that's okay. No one cares. No, we're not being we don't have this side group where we're oh, I made this guy tap 10 times. Nobody cares, and it's it's definitely frustrating when you are training with somebody and you have a submission or you have whatever, and they're just yeah, just because you're way stronger than me, you're not allowing me to work my finish.
Right.
Because that's no good. You know what I mean? And you should be able to work your defense in modify it so that you're kind of imitating the amount of strength that I would have, kind of thing, because that's more realistic, and it ultimately is going to be better for the male training partner as well.
Yeah.
To give a little bit more.
I think that communication key is key.
Yeah.
For just, I'm not criticizing you.
No.
I'm just saying what it is that makes us so that I get something out of it and you get something out of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Without it being
Awkward. Yeah. And none of the girls want to sound like a bitch, and unfortunately, because of the way our culture is, that's what happens.
It
It's
is.
you don't want to sound like a bitch, but it's yeah, but I also don't want to be on the sidelines for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Or I think there's a lot of women that quit. because it's like,
100%, yeah.
it's
or
not a space that, yeah.
Yeah, what's the point?
So we need that communication in order to build the numbers and
Yeah.
take over.
All right, ladies.
All right.
Till next time.
Till next time. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.